Episode 4 gives you a backstory on Luke. And when Luke was a child, he was frustrated in the Hell House because nobody believes that he's seeing things, including his, quote, imaginary friend Abigail, which isn't an imaginary friend, she's a ghost. But Abigail isn't the only thing that Luke sees. Because on one of the first days in the Hill House, Olivia and Hugh are cleaning out the old relics, and they come across a bowler hat that Luke wants. And when he puts on the hat, Hugh Crane asks him if he likes the hat, to which Nell says he loves the hat. Hugh says, "How do you know?" And she says, "It's a twin thing." Because the two have a special connection from being twins. But that night, as Luke is sleeping, he hears something outside of his bedroom, and when he peeks outside, he sees this huge man who is literally floating above the ground from room to room. So freaked out, Luke hides under his bed, and sure enough, the man enters his room and starts looking around, and he finds what he was looking for. It was Luke's new bowler hat. So he puts it on and starts to leave, but at this point, Luke can't hold his breath anymore, and he lets out a gasp. And when he does, this floating man turns around, heads over to Luke's bed, and lifts it up and stares at Luke. So while Nell seems to have this broken neck lady, Luke has the bowler hat guy. So we fast forward to somewhat present day where Luke is in a treatment facility, and he's doing better than he's ever done before. He's got 90 days clean. He's sort of got a girlfriend. They're very close. And he's stuck on the 4th step in the 12 steps. And that's the step that always does him in. That's the step that leads him back to drugs. And while discussing this, something spooks Joey, the somewhat girlfriend/friend who keeps him sober. And while he prods her for what's wrong, he doesn't get really a chance to get an answer because the directive for lights out is given. And Joey has to go to the girl's side and Luke stays with the boy's side. And that's the night that Nell commits suicide. So Luke wakes up at 12:03 a.m., 3:03 Eastern Standard Time, and he's clutching his neck. But he's also staring at Nell, who just yells, "Go!" And then she just disappears. When he wakes up the next morning, you find out that Joey, his friend, has flown the coop. And the director of the treatment facility and some other members are kind of razzing Luke about this because they were so close. They're saying things like, "This is why you don't get close to people in treatment. This is why you don't rely on addicts." And it's stressing Luke out to the point where he leaves the meeting and says, "I gotta go get some fresh air." So Luke goes into his bedroom and he notices that there's a note under his pillow that says, "Don't come after me." And it's obviously from Joey, and he doesn't follow this order. He decides to jump out a window and go try to find her. Now, he's not planning on leaving treatment. He's just going after Joey. And he calls Nell that day and says, "Hey, I had one of those weird feelings that we've had before. I don't have a phone right now. Just call the treatment facility. I should be back by tonight." And that's the plan because he thinks he knows where Joey is. So he camps out on a park bench and just waits for her to arrive. And sure enough, that night, she does. But she's not the only thing to arrive because the man with the bowler hat is seen in the distance. So Luke tries to ignore that and approaches Joey, who is unfortunately relapsed after 9 months clean, and he's trying to get her back into the treatment facility. He calls the treatment facility up, but they don't want to take her back. They say the beds are too valuable and they need it for people who actually want to get clean. And unfortunately for Joey and for Luke in this situation, if you leave treatment, you did it to yourself and you're on your own. So at this point, it's late at night. They don't really have a lot of options. And Luke says, "I can probably scrounge up enough money to get us a motel. You helped me get clean. I'm going to try to help you get clean again." So they take what little money they have to Steven's old house with his separated wife. And while they're walking up to the house, he's expanding on the whole twin thing, saying that their connection is so close that one time Luke broke his ankle. And even though Nell wasn't with him, she started having throbbing pain in her ankle to the point where she called up Luke to see what was going on. And while Joey doesn't believe this, you find out it's true. At this point, though, they've arrived at the house and Luke goes up and rings on the doorbell, but he doesn't find Steven. He just finds his soon-to-be ex-wife. And Luke, because he was in treatment, had no idea that they're separated. And this is relatively new, because 2 months ago, when Luke was 1 month clean and Joey was 7 months clean, they came over for dinner. And at this dinner, you see the relationship between Luke and Steven is fractured because Luke has burned Steven so many times that he just doesn't buy his sobriety at this point. He doesn't think it's going to last. So when Luke shows up that day looking for Steven, he's a little surprised that Steven's not there. He's living in some new apartment. And while Steven's soon-to-be ex-wife doesn't give him money, she does give him Steven's new address. So Luke heads to Steven's new apartment, and when he enters it, he suddenly gets this extremely cold feeling. He starts snooping through the drawers, finds an old camera, finds an iPad, heads down the steps, and that's when Steven catches him. So I gotta take this opportunity to say, I'm sorry, Luke, because I said it's exactly what it looks like, and it wasn't what it looks like. Luke just looked in really rough shape because he was freezing cold. But Steven gives him $200 to return the iPad. He says, keep the camera, sell it, and Luke goes on his way. He gives the $200 to Joey, and the plan is for them to get a motel room together. But Luke is looking in worse and worse shape. like he's coming down with the flu or something. And before they can actually get that hotel room, Joey dips off into an alley, and she says she's gonna do drugs so she doesn't start going through withdrawal, but she completely bails on Luke, burns him out of the $200. And to make matters worse, the man with the bowler hat is still following Luke around. So all night, Luke starts looking through various shanty towns for Joey, but to no avail. And that morning, he actually gets jumped. So the guy has no money, he just got beat up, they took his shoes of all things, and he feels like shit. With nowhere else to turn, he ends up calling the treatment facility back, begging for a bed, swearing to them that he didn't relapse, he didn't use drugs. And it's a good time that he called because they want to get in touch with him because Stevens arrived looking to let him know that Nell is dead. So the woman from the treatment center and Stevens say, "Stay where you are, we'll come pick you up." So while Luke is pacing, doing this practice of counting to 7 that he invented when he was a kid to kind of feel safe, the man with the bowler hat is getting closer and closer and closer until finally it's on top of him. And when Luke turns around, he sees that it's actually his mother wearing the suit and the bowler hat. And her eyes turn into a very bright light. But that bright light actually is the headlights of the car from Steven and the woman in the treatment facility. And when Steven gets out of the car, Luke immediately starts reassuring him that he didn't relapse, he's still clean, but he feels like he's going through withdrawal. But Steven doesn't really care about that. He says, "We gotta go because Nell killed herself." Luke pauses, takes this in, and says, No, she didn't. Thank you for watching this recap. If you do not see the next one up in the corner right there on the end screen, don't worry, it'll be up shortly. Please consider following the channel. That'd be cool. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. And if you don't, there's a thumbs down button for a reason.